So welcome tonight. Thank you for having spent some time with us already. Now we're gonna jump into the creative response program. So this is actually my first program back from medical leave, so bear with me in advance if I'm a little rusty. So my name is M. Wang, and my pronouns are they, them. I'm the Education and Public Programs Manager at Tefra ICA, and it is an honor this evening to be able to host this program, and I want to thank everyone again for coming. The Creative Response Program provides an opportunity to consider different voices and perspectives in reference to the works on view at Tefra ICA. Past presenters have included poets, dancers, writers, musicians, podcast producers, chefs, and more. This current program will feature Stephanie Grimm, she, her. Stephanie is an art and art history librarian for George Mason University Libraries and a current graduate student in history of art. Stephanie earned an MSI in University of Michigan with a focus on preservation and art librarianship, as well as a BFA in illustration from the School of Visual Arts. Her research interests are focused on the various forms of the book and artist publications, including mini comics and zines. She served as one of the curators of Mason's artist book collection and is also the manager of Fenwick Gallery, an exhibition space housed in Fenwick Library, which supports artists in the arts research community at Mason. It is a great pleasure tonight to be able to introduce Stephanie to you all. Are you ready to take it away? All right.
So cool. Thank you. I will try to project to the room, but it does go against my better nature as a librarian to put my voice in a room. So thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm really pleased that the folks here at Tefra invited me for this creative response. It was one that I was a little puzzled being invited to do because when it comes to the subject of rest, I'm not someone who's very good at practicing what I'm going to preach tonight. So it really was like a moment to sort of think about like, where can I inject rest of the work that I do, or take a moment of pause and take a moment of reflection. So I started preparing for this the way that I normally do a lot of my teaching, a lot of the work that I do, which was talking to someone else, asking for advice from someone else. So a colleague of mine gratefully agreed to sit down over coffee and think through some ideas. And this colleague is a very learned scholar, a PhD in political theory and book arts, and book histories and rare books, and said, do you know the root of the word scholar, schole, comes from the ancient Greek for leisure, for free time, the freedom to think, the freedom to have the space, to be afforded that time, that space to think through things, to seek knowledge. And so that was kind of a nice anchor point as I was thinking about this program and what to prepare. So there were about as many ways to do librarianship as there are to be an artist. As you may have heard from the bio, my work is kind of all over the place. It doesn't maybe seem like what you would expect of a librarian. I have a kind of unusual position working as a subject librarian. From day to day, the work really changes. Some days I may be working with game design students on research methods, or meeting with students who are working on class or studio projects and doing one-on-one consultations, or helping a faculty member who's looking for an 1890s edition of an ancient Indian Veda that exists only in one library in, in Delhi, and we happen to find it. So it really runs the gamut. There's a lot of unpredictability, and because I also have this role managing a gallery, there's also that element of working directly with artists, thinking about the way that artists engage with libraries and engage with research. So all of these situations are really driven by the work of asking questions. When I'm building collections, when I'm thinking about programs for the library, that question may be, what's going to best serve the community? What's needed for these populations and these groups that I work with? And with students and learners, it's the reference interview. A set of questions, the protocol is a strong word, but the method that librarians are trained in, which is talking with someone, asking open-ended questions to get somebody to ideally articulate what they're actually looking for. You may have been part of one of these without realizing it. If you've ever visited a library and asked a question of a librarian, you notice they maybe don't try to directly answer your question. But thinking about this program and thinking about this exhibition and the work I tend to do day to day is, it's always in service of something else. These questions are always to get someone from point A to point B. Research is always in service of productivity, especially in the university, publish or perish, the breakneck speed of things, maybe more so in some disciplines than others, but it's still always working towards something. And so I was wondering, like, what would it mean to do research, to think about research that's decoupled from productivity?
Yeah.
That's only in service of itself, maybe even in service of nothing. Research for curiosity's sake, or for wondering. And how would you start to frame that? I think there can be a perception of librarianship as kind of a magic trick, like, is this the book you were looking for? Like, but you can find that and hit on that. And it is thrilling, like, it is very satisfying to me to be able to directly answer someone's question. And so this was also really an exercise and a challenge for me to sort of step back and think about, like, not being about answering a question, but about reflection and about revelation. So when working with students, and especially working with artists, we are, I'm very aware of this. I am wanting to think about how we ask questions of ourselves and of other people. When working with especially undergraduate populations, they may be coming into the library for a specific art history assignment or an assignment where they have to write a paper, but they're not thinking of the library as falling into a space that's serving their creative practices or their studio work. They think, I come here, I get a book, I write a paper, I leave. And so a lot of my work is really thinking about how to break that paradigm and have students thinking about different ways to engage with the library. So we want to cultivate this ability to ask questions with students, but also with ourselves. I'm also very aware of and want to locate this work of, like, question asking and research in the histories of institutions, the histories of research as they exist within the Western world, our imperative towards positivist forms of knowledge. In a keynote lecture to the Triangle Libraries in North Carolina, artist and librarian Jennifer Ferretti spoke about this very issue, this idea of disciplines, art history, the humanities, as a form of domination. Ferretti writes about the tension between the work of artists and the work of libraries, museums, and archives, and other knowledge institutions. The work of artists is generally not bounded by the limits of a particular field or a method, and they're often without the apparatuses that we expect with traditional, quote unquote, forms of scholarship, like bibliographies. When you come into an exhibition, you may see an artist statement, but an artist doesn't have to tell you what they were thinking about. Some choose to be very explicit and talk about their inspiration and the references and the way they see themselves fitting into different conversations or threads. And others withhold that information, sometimes intentionally, sometimes they're not really sure what the work they're doing means. They may refuse explanation, and it's sort of left to the viewer as an exercise to think about what this might be, but without resolution. So the work of librarians, on the other hand, is happening firmly within systems that are shaped by traditional disciplines. Specifically, Western European systems that set the boundaries on what can be considered knowledge, what constitutes information, and what are the most appropriate ways of understanding and interacting with the world. The written word privileges the visual, the conceptual supersedes the physical and the tactile, and sight is greater than touch. There are also the inextricable and enduring legacies of research and its direct connections to much darker legacies of colonialism, genocide, and supremacy. In this exhibit alone, there is work by Deborah Grayson, where she has actually plumbed archives of photographs of institutionalized people of color. And in redrawing them, seeking to reinstitute civic humanity, but thinking about the way that research and photography in service of research turns an individual into a subject. And Grayson's work, to me, when I'm looking at it, it's these two pieces and also the piece around the corner are a way of injecting humanity back into the subject through that transcription through drawing. In decolonizing methodologies, I've got this book up here if anyone's interested in looking at it. Scholar Linda T.Hy Smith describes the history of research in relation to Indigenous people specifically. Quote, research is one of the dirtiest words in the Indigenous world's vocabulary. We take for granted that research is done for the betterment of us all, for the greater understanding and a shared humanity. But as Huey Smith points out, this is as much a reflection of our training and our own ideologies about research. So for this reason, the work of librarians, instructors in universities, and the work I do with students needs to include points of critical focus, reflection, metacognition, and an explicit examination of our own biases, and of the systems that we take for granted as being unbiased, like libraries. A somewhat more innocuous way I'll point this out is sort of an introduction to students, is ask them to look at where the photography books are in the library, and they have to go to the 5th floor. Then I ask them to look for the art books in the library. They have to go to the 4th floor. And so we ask, why this distance? Why this separation? Why is photography wedged between bridge engineering and typography? And art is down closer to the humanities and the social sciences. And what we end up discussing is how the system of the Library of Congress was formed in the 19th century at a point in time when photography was not considered a form of art. So the ideas and the biases of over 100 years ago still inflect the systems that we're using today. And this is one of the more innocuous examples, but it starts to become clear as you wander through our collections, the way it's shaping the way that students and researchers can engage with the work. So how do we work within those kinds of systems? And how do we understand how they're positioned to deal with other kinds of knowledge besides the written word and other ways of knowing? They're designed in service of research, of organizing, producing, and legitimizing certain forms of knowledge. So again, in preparing for today, I wanted to think about what it would look like to try and link research from production into output. And I don't know if I can actually fully do that or if we can do that, but maybe we can start to reconsider what counts as knowledge and how we seek and share knowledge with others. So we're going to try to bring a little pause to the process of research. I'm not concerned with efficiency. In fact, I can't even do my job today. I can't help you look something up. I brought a couple books, but it's going to be pretty limited. So we're going to go through an activity, an exercise, working with those kinds of open-ended questions, those reference interviews that we do. But it's going to be anchored in this space. The knowledge that we can possibly pull together is only what's shared between us, what we see on the walls, maybe what's in a few books, what you've brought with you today.